fundamental difference between us doing that now with the special education. So right now with our special education expulsion program at the TEPSET, right? We've done that very successfully. We brought in different kids for that. The reason that was successful is because the surrounding districts already had the pot of money, right? So they had a pot of money of, say, you know, $500,000 that they had to spend on special education. We said to them, instead of spending the $500,000, if you do our program, you can reduce that amount, but the money's already allocated. You know, if we were to try to say to surrounding districts, hey, we've got this great program for distance learning. We have X, Y, and Z. It's really awesome, and we can build it out really great. We would say to South Windsor or Vernon or Summers, hey, come to our program. And it costs $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, whatever it is to be in the program, right? They don't have the money for that. They don't have the money budgeted for that. It's not something that they naturally allocate. They wouldn't work with their finances to be able to put that money and pay out of their school district to it. So there's a funding issue of trying to do that revenue thing, and we couldn't figure out a way to kind of offer that. That's one element of that.
Scott, may I again? But that doesn't make sense to me, because if a child chooses to go to the correct school, that town has the money to send them to the correct school. They have no choice.
They have no choice, but they would have a choice in terms of sending them to our school. So there's a state law that says, by the Chef O'Neill arrangement, that says if your child goes to a magnet school, you have zero choice. You have to figure out how to budget for it. You have to send the $4,000 to $6,000 over to CREC, which we send, as you know, about $300,000 over to them. These districts would say we have to pay the CREC bill. We don't have to send our kids to Ellington's awesome distance learning program, and very few districts would do that. They would have no money to do it. So that's the tricky part of it. And we thought the same thing, Karen. Like, you know, we're entrepreneurial. We're like, oh, let's do that. Like, we started going down that road, and we spent some hours talking about that. We're like, well, we could do it this way. Can we do it this way? Because that's what we thought would have been a really cool idea. Because we were trying to figure out how to fund the biggest thing with the running the distance learning program. So if you just think about elementary, right? The elementary is more like, do you have a first grader for the distance learning program? Do you have a second grade teacher? Do you have a third grade teacher? Because you got to offer them. Do you have an art teacher that can do it? Do you have a music teacher that can do it? And kind of still run everything and make sure the kids have the same amount of cycles and all of that kind of stuff. So you're sitting there thinking about the staffing, right? Like, how many teachers is it? And then add up the money. If you start to think about it that way, in just the K through 6, the money gets very large very quickly. You're talking over $500,000, right? And so even if we wanted to kind of create that, there's a significant amount of revenue that we would have to figure out, and a significant amount of resources that we would have to push away from the other kids to kind of get that going. That was the challenge, because our ideas, we're thinking like you. Like, we want to say, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Let's give it to you. You know, like, that's the mindset we should have. And we can't figure out a way, even with the year where we got forced into this, where we took all our intervention specialists and all of that and reallocated them and had people out of their kind of normal jobs. We couldn't figure out how to take those interventionists and those specialists, make sure that they were now going to see kids for intervention and do the specialist work that we have them for, right? Make sure that our elementary specials were allocated right so they could do what needs to be done, and then find the resources to offer a separate elementary program. That's where we couldn't figure that funding out to get even close to it, which is a challenge.
Yeah, and I'll just add, you know, Scott's absolutely right. The mechanisms right there for collaboration between districts, or you know, even a regional program being set up, aren't there at the state level. CREC probably couldn't even right now create a distance learning program because there's a moratorium on magnet schools, and there's also a magnet school process by which somebody would have to enter into a lottery to get in there. And so they would have to create a school, as Scott mentioned, that tuitions people in. And it's not going to be necessarily on us unless there's a change at the state level. It's not necessarily going to be on Ellington Public Schools to fund a Ellington family's choice to go to a remote school that's set up unless there's, again, some state level changes. And so, in setting up these programs, trying to be entrepreneurial, without that mechanism there to force, Summers or anybody else to join in with Ellington, they may not do it. And Scott's absolutely right. I mean, the amount of time that we spent at the beginning of the year on resource allocation, and the principals there in the back absolutely know this. It took us 10 meetings to figure it out. And the only way we were really able to figure it out is because we had a large number of kids choosing to go silver learning. And so we had classroom teachers that were available to us. We don't necessarily expect that would be the same case next year as kind of more people get comfortable coming back in. So that resource allocation, especially at the elementary level, becomes much more difficult. And Scott said if we start hiring teachers, that gets expensive fairly quickly. I think the other thing to note at the 7-12 level, where we didn't necessarily move resources around as much, there's still an impact in the classroom, and I know the principals back there spoke about it at the workshop, and some of the teachers spoke about it as well. It is not the best learning environment when you have a class in front of you and a class at home. And that to some point, what I heard in kind of facilitating my group discussion was that disadvantages both sets of students in a way, because you can't really focus on the students at home, and you can't really focus on the students in the classroom. So kind of a mixed bag there. I know Principal Nash was in my group at the middle school, spoke about that pretty eloquently about how he wouldn't design the system that we have right now to move forward if we were going to offer a remote learning opportunity going forward, just because of that, kind of detriment to the classroom environment. The other thing that we talked about, in my group, just for another point is, it gets much more complicated at the high school level if you're not going to do that, because the course offerings really explode. I mean, you're talking about 70 plus staff teaching 5 classes a day. That's 350 different sections. I don't know how many courses that actually is, but it's a lot of different opportunities for students to have different schedules. And so if you're not doing that same setup where you have kind of that dual pedagogical reality in the classroom, it just becomes logistically very complicated.
The other factor that's tricky is, so we sat there and we said, okay, could we try to prioritize elementary, even certain grades, and say, maybe we could offer it, maybe we could figure out the funding, and even looking at say, okay, let's see what we're going to get from the federal stimulus package, right? And say, oh, well, maybe we could float the money, right? So maybe we could say, okay, startup cost, so to speak, right? And budget for a year to 2 if we get enough money, and then slowly build so we can offer something cool, and then slowly build the budget over a 2-year basis to kind of put that in. What we're disappointed in is that, and this is what drives Brian crazy, is the amount of money that we've received from the stimulus package, and all 3 of these, is as a pittance to try to do staffing and build that up. There are some districts that it's so out of whack where they're receiving 6, 7, 8 times more money than Ellington is in regards to doing this. And I'm aware that there's probably right now, and just to give you a little bit of the landscape, there are some districts that are going to try to do some sort of remote learning option for next year. They're looking at it. The indication from our CAP superintendent, just to give you a landscape of Connecticut, is that the vast majority of them, she said only 4 she could find that want to do it, and CAPS has been pushing at the state level to not have the governor require the remote learning. And so it's this tricky thing where everyone's sitting here going, there's the Remy Socias of the world, that all of these superintendents and all of these teachers are seeing that there's all these awesome opportunities that occurred and different things that are really cool and really make a lot of sense. And we're like, we need to capitalize on some of that stuff. That's really cool for a kid to be able to do a lot of the things and learn a lot of the skills that Remy said. That's amazing. And we're sitting here going, how do we do that next year? Like, where do we go with this? We couldn't figure out a way to do it practically with what we have and how we can operate it. And that's the frustrating part.
So, let me ask you this, so, let's say we don't invite other schools, let's back off of that a second and just deal with our own district. I understand there's a lot more challenges in the K through 6, I get that. But the 7 through 12, I guess I need more understanding of why couldn't they, we have some dynamic online teachers. Why would we not be able to, not the whole school, but, for each subject, each grade, get a teacher that would be, for lack of a better term, turn their camera on, so that we could allow these children, like Remy or others, that want that distance learning option, just educate me more why that's not going to work.
And I'd like, Brian, could you take that, and then after, at some point, Christine.
Sure, and I'm summarizing some of the comments from the groups and in other areas. At the 7-12 level, the teachers currently are teaching the students in front of them and at home. So that's been quite a bit of writing on that and all the periodicals, education research. That's causing it's causing a very difficult ability of teachers to be present for the students online and then present for the students at home. And we heard from teachers quite a bit on that. The question then, as I'm hearing it, is can you find a standalone teacher in each content area that would just do the distance learners? And then you get into what Brian was discussing earlier about the program of studies and the number of courses. So to have like one content area, a teacher be able to offer like any of the different options for a 9th, a 10th, 11th, or 12th grader who's choosing to be distance learning, and then could have like a variety of courses to choose from. It's very challenging, and again, when you're talking about one FTE allocation for each content area, to offer access to all of those courses is not realistic from a staffing standpoint. I'm just giving an example of the 1.0 FTE. So the big challenge is to find a way at the secondary level. We did all, like as Scott was alluding to, all of these mental exercises to scratch our heads on all the different possibilities. At the K-6 level, what was very successful was having a dedicated teacher for a silver class, that's all they're doing. But even then, in our current model, which we did an excellent job with, our numbers were higher. That was the big discussion at the beginning of the year. So finding a way to get the right class size, finding a way at the secondary level to get the right course allocation, all of those variables are pretty challenging. So hopefully that touched on parts of the question. I'm happy to clarify.
Yeah, Brian, bring back, I think also Jen was alluding to the middle school. So if you take the middle school, so the high school is complicated, right? Because there's all sorts of different classes. You try to like apply to the middle school. So you say, okay, let's say you're an 8th grader and we have 25, 35 8th graders that want to do remote learning, right? It worked really well. They're really excited about it, right? So then you say, okay, how do we accomplish that? Well, we know they have to take math. We know they have to take science, social studies, ELA, right? We know they have to do their specials. So the idea would be you would have to create a 7th/8th grade or just 8th grade distance learning team, right? So we have the mic went off? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Audience, if you couldn't hear me. So when you get to the middle school, you're talking 5 to 8 staff members to do a separate distance learning team at the middle school to accommodate those students. You would hope, right, that even if you could do that, let's say we could figure that out and fund it and figure it out, then we would be at, well, is it 15 kids that want to do it, or is it 37 kids that want to do it? And if it's 37 kids that want to do it, we go, okay, well, it's going to be really hard for that teacher, as we know, We had these conversations back in September when we were talking about the 37 class sizes. What did we do with those? Well, what we did this year was we said, 37 is no good. The teacher's trying to work it out. It's not working out. We're going to add a interventionist over there. We're going to add a Dan Spada over there, and started to break it up to give more support for that. There would be no way for us to figure that out. And, we were thinking, okay, well, maybe we could just you could combine 7th and 8th grade, like try to do one distance learning team and structure the schedule to do it that way, where maybe it's one distance learning team for 7th and 8th grade. We looked at that. And then we ran into all sorts of other challenges and difficulties of trying to figure that out too. So we couldn't, we wanted to be creative with it, but we kept getting roadblocks that were not sustainable, that were going to just pull too many resources away from the other kids. That's where we kept falling into the same trap every time.
Mary, I don't think that's the way it says.
I did go to the meeting that they had. I was out in California, so I had to leave early before the whole group got together. But in the group I was in, we discussed some of the issues that would concern distance learners. There is more absenteeism with the students that have been through distance learning, and I think Christy could speak more to that. There is also ways of possibly doing a 504 plan for regular ed students in which, for some reason, that they can't attend school, whether they have a parent or a family member with COVID and they're in quarantine. There would be accommodations made for those people to distance learn. So a lot of the things that we did learn with the distance learning, we will be able to carry over, even if we do have all the kids coming back to school, for those that have maybe some kind of exceptional needs, whether it be emotionally or physically, or they want to take some really special course. So I feel that if we can accommodate those students that need to be in a distance learning situation, then we will figure out a way of doing that. And I think that bringing them all back to school would take the question of whether to send them or not to send them. Now, I feel we have to continue with distance learning if we are in a situation like this September that we were in at the beginning of this school year. But otherwise, I feel that the logistics for doing it was very difficult. It was very stressful for the teachers, both at the high school, middle school level, and the elementary level too, because those distance learners had large classes, larger than they should have been for those age groups. So I think that that's the way we should lean, is to do this type of a program in school learning, and then have remote learning for the students that need. And I really would like to know how much, with the absenteeism, what difference in the percentage?
Well, right now, so I did speak to that, and that's actually one of our goals for CSR is
Christy, move forward.
working with the student, thank you, working with the families and students. We've doubled our truancy numbers this year. So when you talk about educating a whole child here, because what I'm hearing is a lot about academics, and yeah, it's distance learning is working really well. It's also about the social emotional aspects, which we've always had our fingers on, including this Board of Ed. So when we came to you in the fall and said this is not good for kids, health-wise, we can keep them safe physically, but we also need to worry about their mentality, right? So we were one of the first districts to bring them back based on the fact that we are looking at the entire child, not just about academics. This is about the student's mental health and wellness. I will tell you that the administration team behind me, as well as the teachers in all of these buildings, have worked double this year to make it work for students. Having the camera in your classroom behind you, or having the kids in front of you, trying to not forget about the people on the screen, not seeing their hands raised, trying to watch everybody, it's almost impossible. The amount of work these teachers have done has been incredible, and I have to say, over and over again, I'm so proud to be an Ellington just to go by and watch all of them. I've been in classrooms where I'm watching on learning, kids have their cameras off. The teachers are spending the time, put your cameras on, put your cameras on. I've seen just a group of small group children, I've seen a math lesson with a teacher teaching a math lesson to icons. Right, so being a teacher today and doing the dual learning is extremely difficult. From the mental health perspective, we see more hospitalizations, more kids having difficulty coming back, just like Carrie referenced. Anxiety disorders are on the rise. Keeping these kids home is the opposite of what we should be doing for these kids. That doesn't help them. That doesn't help them grow, get them to go to college, jobs, opportunities. We have so many parents who are working with. Our school psychologists are showing up at 6 o'clock in the morning at people's homes. I've never seen a group work harder than the teachers and psychologists and social workers in Ellington Public Schools. Every single day, our jobs become harder and harder, and it's all worth it for the kids. But to then say we're going to go back to distance learning and almost instill an opportunity that's not the right opportunity for students. They need to be here. If it's healthy, if COVID's under control, kids need to be in school. And for those who want distance learning, and I get that it's really great, and there's pods, and academically they do well, there's 75 more that aren't doing well, that are taking advantage of distance learning because they're home watching their sisters, or they're home doing this, or their parents have difficulty with transportation. So I'd like to, find out more about the 400 students that are staying home, because from the perspective of what we're seeing, it's more difficult for these kids to come back, and I'm worried. I'm worried about the next generation. I'm worried about the loss of opportunity to get out of their house and socialize. I'm worried about the amount of kids that are going into the hospital, the amount of kids that are being seen by psychologists who need it the most, but they're at home and they're not turning their cameras on. I hear John, all of the principals, you're trying to do the attendance. Kid comes on A period, they don't show up C, D, E, or F. So all the principals, every single one of them has gone to a home visit, if not one or two. This is beyond the scope of just enjoying distance learning. This is a whole new way of working. And while it may be good for some kids, for most of the majority, it's not the right thing from what we're seeing from our perspective. Absenteeism, teachers not being able to see on the camera what's actually happening, what the assessments look like. We get assessments in where we know that parents are healthy, and that's great. Because they're home, some parents can be home. But that's not a true assessment of what the students are doing. We can't see it, they're not right in front of us. So I'm worried. And I will just say, I would prefer to not see the opportunity to come back for distance learning. I'd like to see kids in school. And like, I know Miriam was also worried about kids with health issues and things like that. We worked with that. Our TAPSTEP program's full right now, kids with anxiety disorders, because we have to put them in that program to get them back into school. We're worried about what we're going to do this summer to get those kids who have been distance learning, who haven't been in an official building all year, so that they can learn how to come back to school and interact with people. And I'm not saying distance learners aren't interacting with people, because I know they are. The parents are doing their best to get them out and be with groups of people. But there are a lot of kids who are just staying home and not interacting at all. So, anybody have any questions for me?
Can I just ask you something? Are the kids more stressed about catching COVID if they come back to school, or are they becoming isolated and depressed?
I think it's, from what I've seen and what I've heard from students, it's more isolation. At first, I believe a lot of it was COVID. Students were nervous. Parents were nervous. There's no doubt that they're going to catch this. Right now, it's more, oh my God, I got to come back to school. Some students are saying, I've already been out and I'm going to be the last one coming in, and it's going to be weird. And I haven't talked to this one in a while. I haven't done this in a while. Now they're used to getting up, putting their camera on their forehead, right? Because if you have to be seen, a lot of students will do the forehead. I'm used to just being able to do what I want to do, eat what I want to eat, do things. Some are not doing well academically, and they can't get the support and help they need because they're not accessing online. So this just leads to a whole new intervention for school psychologists, regular ed teachers, special ed teachers. We're identifying kids with special needs who haven't stepped foot in the building all year. And we can't say that they're not gonna do well if they have a teacher in front of them the entire time. We can't even differentiate for that. So if they had been in, could they be doing well? If they had showed up for every meet, could they be doing well? It's really difficult right now.
And Liz, if I could, I think it's also fair to say that there are students and their families that are still nervous about COVID, and that's why they've chosen the remote learning. I know there are certain families that I've spoken to, so there's a segment of that. I think there's also some families that they feel really good and they feel like their child's excelling and having different things, different experiences in a positive way. I think that is very fair to say. I think it's a mixed bag. I think the rub of all of this is we all want to help all the students be very successful. So this is all a very, very productive conversation, right? We want people who are excited about the flexibility and the time management, things that Remy Socha said. We want to be able to capitalize on that and say, wow, let's have this student or some similar students have a great year, right? Like, that's a good thing. All the teachers want that. All the administrators want that. At the same time, we're sitting here going, okay, what do we do with a lot of the situations that Christy has mentioned? And they're off the charts. They're off the charts, and we're very concerned, and we haven't been able to thread the needle to try to figure out and give you a recommendation on how to offer a distance learning program that we feel would not sacrifice a lot of the opportunities and supports and needs of all of our children. That's the crux of where we're struggling, as you can tell.
I can definitely hear that, but
Yep.
I want to give Miriam an opportunity
Sure.
to speak as well. Go ahead, Miriam.
I'd like, for the record, spot for you to explain to the people here who are not educators the constraints that certification requirements at grades 4 up through the high school, and how teachers are certified for one area and they can't teach outside of their certification. So I think there are parents at home and perhaps people around this board who don't understand the requirements that certification places on who and what I can teach as a teacher, and depending upon my grade level.
Yeah, it's a good point. So when we put all of our resources up on the board, right? So we go to the conference room and we say, we need to fill these positions, distance learning, do this, right? And we put all the teachers up on the board and we say, okay, sometimes we say, this teacher is only, they hold an old certification that is very narrow or very broad, and they can't teach this particular early literacy programming or reading consultant or whatever it may be. And so we say, well, we can't put them in there. So it limits it. And what invariably happens when you have, the State Department over time has had a myriad of different certifications. They change. And so someone may hold a certification that is from 1982 and they just have it and it's outdated, and Miriam knows what those look like. And then they change different certifications and different things. What invariably happens is some of the educators, and these are teachers, and this is what puts a strain on these teachers, is say you're a technology integrationist. There's a lot of broad aspects to what you could teach with the certification you have and why you're in that. We start going to the well on the teachers that have more flexible certifications, and we start moving them and popping them in different places. And the other teachers that have more restrictive ones, they just stay. And so in some ways, and we've got some dynamite teachers that have been very, very good sports, that have done everything we have asked, and I know that they'll talk to Brian and say, next year I can't do this. They just say it, and they've been amazing. Like, they're off the charts. They deserve a bonus. We don't do that in education. You know, if this is a private corporation, we'd say, here's another $10,000. What a great job you've done. But they literally say, can you please put me back into X position that I was in? I can't do it. And the certifications make that harder and put an undue pressure on particular individuals. Sorry.
Well, I'd just like to make it clear that if I'm a seventh grade teacher, I may be certified for math. And I can teach math in perhaps 7 through 12. Or I might be able to teach math for 6 to 8. And if we have more than one classroom of teachers, then we need 2 teachers to do that. If we have 34 kids. I was one of those people who had an N8 certification, so I was that no longer exists. But that made it really flexible. Didn't mean that I would be successful from N through 8, but now certifications are limited, and people can't teach out of their field. And for me to be dual or triple certified, I have to go back and take a whole nother set of courses to be certified. So that limits what we can do.
Sure, no, I understand.
Jen and Carrie.
Sorry. Okay, I'm
Jen
sorry.
and Carrie, sorry, then I'll come back.
One of the things that I would encourage anyone who has any questions or any hesitancy is to talk to some of the faculty, the staff, and the administrators. That was very telling to me during the workshop. And as much as the social emotional is a part of our students, it's also a part of our teachers and our staff and our administrators. And I'm not going to call out on anybody that's sitting in the audience because I wouldn't do that. So, but I'll give an example. Last week, a couple weeks ago, there was testing at the high school. Everybody was home doing remote learning except for the juniors. And I've now had to tell my son he's got to sit very close to me, my sophomore, so I can make sure he's got his camera on and everything else. And to hear the teachers call attendance, it took 15 minutes almost. Are you here? Last call. Are you here? Last call. Did you turn your camera on? I kept hearing these same things over and over and over again. And as much as we put 120% into our students, we've also got to consider the faculty, the staff, and the administrators. And as incredible as they've been, I do believe there is some burnout. And I will say that that social emotional is hitting them as well. And it's hitting any adult, actually, at this point in time. And as a parent, like I'm going to be going back into the workforce over the summer and back into the office. I've been fortunate enough to be able to work at home, but I am going to be going back. I'm going to have to rely on the school to be there for my kids and for my children to have the school and the transportation.
Brian, hang on just a second, go ahead.
I appreciate that, Jen, and I understand that, you know, you're relying on the school when you go back to work. My point is giving families choices. One of the things that was not brought up in terms of the social emotional, and I'll just share this, I'm not the only parent out there with this view. I did not, the bigger concern beyond coronavirus for me was the masks. I feel like as a parent of my kids, I didn't want them every single day to be reminded how screwed up our world was. And if you're in a building every single day with a mask and everybody's wearing a mask, that is a constant reminder. I'm not saying putting that on any other parent, I'm telling you just as a parent for me in my thought process. And I know that I'm not alone in having this conversation. So when you're talking about social emotional, and Scott, you brought up that yes, some people are still afraid of corona, but some of it's just they're in a groove, they're happy. probably have done it around the state as well, I hear stories. It wasn't perfect, but it gave the kids normalcy. Nobody had to be told they couldn't hug somebody. Nobody had to be told to stand 6 feet away. Nobody had to be told, put your mask up. When I was in CVS the other week, and this poor guy walked in, he apparently had some issues. They accosted this man because he forgot his mask. I mean, it wasn't like, excuse me, sir, everybody please put your mask on. It was like he had committed a crime. So it's not just a fear of coronavirus. It's a psychological thing regarding that if masks are worn and continuously worn, not just the physical barrier and how it looks, but there are studies coming out regarding the health. I know that I've had to sit in a 4-hour deposition with a mask. I have never had a headache like that after that. I know it was from the mask. I don't experience that. So I know just personally, long periods of time with the mask on and not a break, that you're going to have that. So it's much more than just the fear of corona. And I do appreciate everything that is being said, and we can all have opinions that in-person learning is better. And I'm not saying that my kids won't return to school in the fall. I'm saying if we can do this as a district, and that I wanted to offer that to the families and students that could benefit from it. And there are some out there, and they may be less in numbers. If we can't, we can't. But I think, I'm still the opinion that I think that offering the families, it's not for us to decide what's best for somebody else's child. It's for the parents to decide what they want for their child. And it may not be what you would choose or what I would choose, but a parent that maybe they say to their high schooler, you have to distance learn because I need you to take care of this baby because now I can have this job because now we can eat. That stinks. But I get it. I get that decision that a mother's going to make. And I'm not saying it's perfect for us, but all I'm saying is if we're able to do it, that we are offering families this option, and that we can potentially service more students in different ways. That's all. So I do appreciate everything you're having to say too, Miriam, about the certification. I think it is difficult from the elementary perspective in terms of the staff. I think we can do it on the 7 to 12 grades, and I think we could offer that. And I don't think it's going to be, the 400 kids that are out now. I don't know what the number's going to be. I don't think it'll be 400 kids that would choose to distance learn. I don't know what the number is, but I think that it's something we could feasibly.
Ms. Sen, can I address the masks? I think it's important to state, I want to state it from my perspective, and I've had conversations with many people, including Carrie. I'm in total agreement with the masks. There is a significant amount of information coming out now from physiological or psychological impacts, especially of young children wearing masks on a regular basis. The masks are an issue. It's a very valid point, and it's really great that Carrie brought it up in terms of why some parents have decided not to send their kids to school this year because they don't want them wearing masks all day long. It's exceedingly hard, and their brains are developing, and it's getting normalized that's what you look at is someone with a mask on and just seeing their eyes. And there is a lot of individuals right now across the world studying these things, and plenty of studies out there that cause for great concern. I can tell you, and it's important for me to state that I am ready that when, and I'm hoping it is soon, that the mask mandate is lifted by the state, I will recommend to the board and to have masks be optional. That's a strong belief on my part when I'm thinking about the health of everyone in the school district, and that would be something that I would recommend and that we would want to move forward. I think it's that important. The problem is, right, here's the rub. The problem is we're sitting here going, we're thinking about all the things that Dr. Laporte brought up with the health of children, right? And we're sitting here going, okay, well, we're trying to get, there's that aspect of things. And then we're sitting here going, well, we have families that in September, if the mask mandate's not lifted, some parents are going to be like, I don't want my kid wearing the mask, which is not healthy either. So there's almost like, in some respects, there's this catch-22. There's no perfect answer to all of this. It's either way you turn, there seems to be an element that is not what people want, and for good reason, right? These are all really justifiable points. So I wanted to kind of say that to the board so they knew my position on the mask, and I really appreciate you, Carrie, bringing that up.
Yeah, the only last thing I'd like to mention is if there is, right now, with what's going on in the legislature, if the vaccinations are forced and it does, and certain vaccinations get added to the list, then we could lose families that way too, whereas if we had a remote option, a distance learning option, we could still include those families without just expelling them. Expelling them from the school system. My understanding of the bill is that if you file a religious exemption and it's not in compliance with the state regs, you actually get expelled. And that's what's being proposed, my understanding, as well as if you're non-compliant, that's fine if you're non-compliant. If you're non-compliant, that's fine, you don't get expelled, but people that are going to try to do the right thing, their children can actually have an expulsion on their record because they didn't get a vaccine that the government said we want you to have, and that's just the state of Connecticut. But it's the bill that's there also says here's the list of the vaccines that are on the list now, but that at any time that list could change, and if there's a vaccine that violates someone's religious beliefs, which is a high likelihood given some of the vaccines that are that use aborted fetuses, you will have potentially more families not able to send their kids to school. And if we don't offer the distance learning, or we abandon this model and we don't keep working at it, then those families won't have a choice. Their only choice they'll have is to homeschool. So it just, I know those are a bunch of what ifs and they may never happen, but those are some of the things that are in the back of my mind as well, and trying to anticipate what could happen in the future.
Gary, we haven't heard from you this evening on the subject. What are your thoughts?
It says I'm joining the call with 3 other people. Jen?
Yes, Marcia. Are you there? Yeah. All right, go ahead, Gary, sorry.
I'm really concerned about the students' social,
Yes?
social health that they've
Yes, I
not
can hear
had
the
in
meeting.
the last year and a half, 2 years. And I'm more concerned about that than I am about maybe.
Can they hear me talk?
Total learning that they haven't gotten. Because I think a lot of kids can catch up on a lot of this pretty quickly. But the social, emotional part of their health is what I'm more concerned about. And I think getting the kids back to normal, getting into school, and being able to interact with other kids is more important. As a teacher, I saw that all the time. They were very, the kids were always concerned about each other. And so, when you isolate kids at home, I think they don't learn how to
with us about, where you're at for distance learning?
After the workshop, I definitely would go with the in-person. I think remote on the back burner for extenuating circumstances, but, I do vote for in-person.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Any other questions? Does anybody want to put forward a motion, or do we want to table this discussion for another time?
I will put forward the motion.
Okay.
All of us.
Mhm.
Whereas the Ellington Public Schools recognize that the world of education has changed over the last year. Whereas the advances in our organization and staff's capacity to provide an education deeply integrated with technology, including creative virtual learning experience, has and will continue to move forward. Whereas all students, with emphasis given to those affected by quarantine and isolation due to COVID-19, will be provided learning opportunities to develop their unique talents and gifts. Whereas the Ellington Public Schools recognize that a comprehensive in-person learning program has the greatest potential to support all students to reach their full academic, social, and emotional potential as grounded in the seeds of civility. Therefore, be it resolved, the Ellington Board of Education directs the superintendent of schools to implement an in-person learning program without a remote learning option for the 2021-2022 school year, unless required by the state of Connecticut, while continuing to develop creative virtual learning opportunities for all students.
No, we have to have a second. Does anybody want a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Gary, second. We'll open it for discussion.
There's just one thing in here I'm a little concerned of, and that is it doesn't say that we as a group could determine to do a remote learning option. It's only if the state requires us to do it. So I just feel that there needs to be something in that portion that would give the board to
An amendment, so that if there was an issue again, as far as you mean, if there was a spike in COVID, or we needed to, that we would have the ability to do that.
Yeah, so it's, I'm glad you brought that up, Liz, it's a really good point. I think part of the mechanism, if things change that dramatically, that would be something where I would want to be bringing in the board to be discussing it fully and the implications of that, and having them vote to shift and move into a more remote learning because of X, Y, and Z. What I think is very important for the staff, and I think I can speak, I know I can speak for the administrative team, and I know I can speak for the teachers in this regard, because I've spoken at length with the teachers union on this, is from their perspective, in terms of planning, in terms of trying to kind of figure things out and navigate all of the parents and the students on what is going to happen next year, and for us to also put some energies into, and we twice in that motion when we wrote it, we wanted to make sure that we emphasized continuing to look for unique virtual learning experiences for kids, right? Like, because that's important, we can't lose that. But the finality of right now for the staff, especially, to say we're not going to do a remote learning option, and let us drive through the end of the school year and drive through the summer and prepare to kind of open school and fold in other creative things that we can figure out and put our energy towards that, as opposed to having to work with parents and students who are saying, well, are you going to do this, or I want to bring it back to this, or it'll make it very unsettling to do the work that needs to get done. Now, that being said, of course, something could happen in June or July or August or October where things go haywire in a particular direction. It's very apparent that things we need to reevaluate. That's when we would call a special, I would recommend to call a special Board of Education meeting to say, these are the things that have developed. this is where we need to go in this direction. We would be folding then in the teachers' union and the administration to say, listen, we're changing assignments. We're moving teachers out of intervention. We're moving them here. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're reestablishing what we've already done to allow this. We have X amount of students that need to do this now for whatever reasons. And then we would actually have the board do a vote on that. And we would make sure, and I think what would be important, we would just also send out something to the parents so they could make sure that they tuned in, so that they're well aware of the complexity and why we're doing a 180 on how we are offering things. So that would be my recommendation on that, in terms of what's the best way to kind of operate and navigate all the complexities here.
I would like to maybe just add something to this so that we don't end up in a situation where we can't make a decision. So I would suggest that we leave unless required by the state of Connecticut or deemed necessary by the Board of Education.
I don't see a problem with that. We could add that in,
I just want to, if it's okay, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you mentioned, Liz, is,
Therefore, be it resolved that the Ellington Board of Education directs the superintendent of schools to implement an in-person learning program without a remote learning option for the 21-22 school year, unless required by the state of Connecticut or deemed necessary by the Board of Education.
yes, I think that will work. Thank you for clarifying that. That's helpful, Liz.
So, as amended,
I accept that amendment.
thank you. Any other discussion? Then we'll call it to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Moving on, EHS end of year events for 2021. Mr. Gabriel.
Hello again, everybody. So I think everyone has a copy of my notes that kind of outlines what we're trying to do. The overriding theme is we are trying to give juniors and seniors an end of year that looks as normal as possible, right? And we are pushing hard to think creatively and find ways to have this be an experience that no one's disappointed in, right? It's important. So I'm just going to quickly run through these. Again, this is more of a Q&A. And then when I'm done, you guys ask me whatever question you have. Is that okay? Junior senior prom, we have a date, we have a venue. It is the lovely Riverview, which is close to Simsbury. It's gorgeous. We will have girls in dresses. We will have fine dining. We will have tables. We will be cohorting those tables. So the people at your table are the people you dance with. Those are the people you hang out with, in case we have to do some type of contact tracing. But we'll have photos. We'll have music. We'll have a DJ. We are making it as normal as possible. Senior Day occurs a couple of weeks later. That is the whole day-long traditional event that we've always done, where the senior class goes to a day camp, the Boulder Ridge Day Camp that they've gone to for years. We will have most of the same events that they've been able to participate in the past. We will use the learning that we've gained through our athletic practices to make sure that we stay as safe as possible while we're doing that. All right?
John, I have a question for you on senior day.
Sure.
Are you allowing students to drive there or parents to drive them if they don't want to take the bus? Is that an option?
It could be.
Okay, I just didn't know, I didn't see it on there, so I was wondering.
No, it could be. I know in the past we've allowed them to do that. We do have, and it doesn't say it in what I've written here, but we have more buses than normal to try and spread students out. But if a parent still says, I'd just much rather arrange some other type of transportation, we will find a way to make that work.
Okay, thank you.
Next is which is that same week. So we have yearbooks coming in on Tuesday of that week. On Friday of that week, that is when we set up both the cafeteria and the gym with individually plated food from Moe's. I don't know if anyone here has ever seen it or had kids go through it, but I think for some kids, this is the most fun part of graduation week. And we will have it set up where folks are distant and they're wearing masks and they get to sign each other's yearbooks, which they missed not being able to do last year. It's a fun evening. It's a really fun evening. Graduation morning, we're taking some of the great things that we did last year, and we are continuing those. So graduation morning, hopefully we'll have a PTA breakfast again like we did last year. I know that the students really enjoyed that. We'll have the class of 2021 rock that they signed just like they did last year. We'll have senior class officers that address the group. So that will be very similar to how we did last year. I don't know if any of you were there, but they were in a series where each senior class officer had something additional to add. It was really very nice. And then we have graduation rehearsal. Okay? The graduation ceremony itself, we worked very, very hard to make this look as normal as possible. It will be in the main athletic fields and in the stands. We've already started taking our measurements, planning out where everybody is. It will look very much like a normal graduation for us. So we'll have families that are separated into groups of 6 on the main athletic field. We'll have live music that's performed by our band and our choir. We will have Val and the Sal and the student council president give an address, just like we always do. We will have some sort of stage. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. But trust me, we'll get that figured out. We'll have photos, and we will make it look as much like a normal, exciting graduation as possible.
Are we gonna limit the time on speeches like we did last year? Parents really enjoyed that.
We don't have that many, to answer your question, we don't have that many addresses down, right? So yes, I think we'll try and be as brief as possible. And then Safe Grad, we will still have the Safe Grad party. They are working on that themselves, and they have also taken ownership of the parade that was a big hit last year. So we will be cooperating with them to try and make that parade as successful and fun as it was last year. What questions can I answer for you?
Well, I don't want to rain on this parade, but what does happen if it rains both days?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
What will happen if it rains both days?
For graduation or for the parade?
Graduation.
We'll come up with a third day. Right, where we could just, we would come up with a third day. And so the thinking of this, yeah, and we've gone back and forth on this, so you can know the thinking. So we're like, okay, the tradition of Ellington has been Friday, right? And we can understand that, right? You bring in your family, you have a Friday, you have like your Saturday family party, and people kind of take the day on Friday, and it's like a long weekend, and that's a really special thing. And so we've worked really hard over the past 6 years to kind of keep that Friday in place, right? And I think it's a good thing for the community. And so we were thinking, Liz, so let's make an assumption that it rains on the Friday and we can't do it. And then we're like, okay, do we push it to a Sunday or a Monday or a Tuesday, or how does that work? And we were like, well, everyone's going to have all these plans scheduled for the Saturday, right? They have all these family parties and different things right there. So we're thinking, okay, let's hope it rains and it kind of stops, and then you do a Saturday morning event, right? It's done within, hour, 2 hours or whatever, and then you have the rest of the Saturday afternoon to do all of your family gatherings and all those sorts of things. So we're hoping on that. But we're going to continue to discuss, and we'd certainly be open to suggestions on if it rains on Friday and Saturday, it's a washout. It's tricky to do things on Sundays because people have other, in some respects, religious, activities that they do. And so it might be the type of thing where it's a Monday situation. I don't think we want to be pushing it all the way to the next Friday, right? Because that would be too long of a time for the seniors to be they're going to graduate, oh, it's canceled, oh, you got to wait another whole week. A lot of people fly in, a lot of people do a lot of big plans, that's really hard to do. So if the worst case scenario, it's on a Monday, which is not ideal, that may be what we have to do, but that's our thought process to this point. But certainly, any input that the board has at any point in time on a third rain date of where it should be placed, I think we would love the input at any point in time.
Can the kids be in the building and then the rest of it be virtual on the second day so that it takes place?
We could probably figure out some sort of indoor option. It's not, as you know, that would not be ideal, because I know mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles, they want to actually be there live. But if that's where we had to go, we would figure it out. We would figure it out. So we're choosing to stay, if possible, with the in-person as normal as possible option. So that would kind of like be the nuclear option. Right? All right, who else has questions for me? Thank you.
I do, like the Monday option and not having the students wait another week. I know it's happened a lot in sporting events. You know, there's always, on the golf tournament, Sundays are a rain out and there's storms and things like that where they push it to Monday. So I'm kind of, you know, NASCAR races, same thing. So I'm kind of leaning towards the Monday rather than have everybody wait the week, especially with folks traveling.
I would agree with that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Is there anything else I can help you guys with? Yes?
I guess I would just like to say that as someone who had a senior last year, it's very appreciated all the time that the admin has put toward the seniors and adding some of these events that were really popular for the community and the parade especially. So,
Thank you, that's very kind. Thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you, John.
Great, thank you guys.
Thank you, John.
Okay, next up, O'Brien's already here. Discussion of the budget, 21, 25. Yeah, he's ready. Let's go.
I'm ready to go. All right, so quick update on progress made with the next year fiscal 2022 budget. So the Board of Finance on the town side went through their deliberations this past week. So as you all know, we've been working hard on the health insurance. We had kind of gotten to a point where we could have offered $113,000 in savings, which is what we've historically done when we've gone to the Board of Finance. We were able to work with them. Cut was $45,000, which no cut's great, but it's certainly something that we can manage. And that leaves us with $68,000 left of kind of savings from this health insurance. We've proposed a couple options for the board to consider. So number one would be restoring the elementary library media specialist, the 1.0 position. We also need funds within the health insurance. Now that we're self-insured, that would be just an extra $68,000 there that we would need to kind of boost our reserve at the end of the year. Or we could repurpose the funds, say, to an unassigned elementary position. We came out with a recommendation to the superintendent to restore the 1.0 library media specialist at the elementary level. We said all along that more positions are better, but that the restructuring that we proposed wasn't necessarily going to hurt services. The good news is if we restore it, we can always do better with our services, and that reorganization that Brian Henderson and the rest of the team are going through is still going to happen, and this position gets put back in place so that we can do more with the resources that we have. So that would be the administration's recommendation to the superintendent.
Thank you, Brian. Let's open it up for discussion.
Could you explain, I'm sorry, I was reading something, maybe I missed it, the repurpose of funds? Where are you getting the funds from?
So when the board passed the budget, it was a 2.51% budget increase. Basically, the Board of Finance only moved to cut $45,000. We had $113,000 of savings in our health insurance account. So what we would do is we would actually transfer, and I believe that's the way that the motion reads, that if the budget actually goes through at that cut, to teacher salaries account where we restore that library media position.
But that would only be about $68,000, right?
$68,000 is what we budget for any vacancy. We budget the master's step 5, which is 67 and change.
Right.
So that $68,000 would cover that.
That would cover only the library media specialist, or?
Correct. The 1.0 library media specialist.
Right, but not.
It's saying choose one of the three, is what they're saying.
Choosing one of the.
Yes, we're giving you 3 options for consideration. We've made a recommendation that option number 1 would be the way that the administration through the superintendent would propose.
So with the teachers retiring, would we then move into these other options?
No, not necessarily. We budget at master's step 5, which is about 68, 67 and change. That doesn't necessarily mean that we hire at 67, right? So some teachers we hire step 1, closer to 50,000, and some teachers we hire at step 13 with a 6-year certificate closer to 95,000. And so typically the way that we've done it is those retirements that come after the budget is set help us with that flexibility with hiring to stay within our total appropriation.
So have we looked at that kindergarten first grade situation? Are we going to need to actually hire an unsound teacher?
Yeah, so we don't have the full numbers in yet. We'll kind of take a look in another week or 2 as to where we think we're going to be on that. We do have kind of in the what is the current grade 2s at center school. We have a 4 teacher block there with students that could be collapsed down into 3 based on the class sizes. So we do have kind of an unassigned elementary teacher position in that. Now, if the class size jumps at center school as that grade goes to the 3rd grade, then maybe it stays where it is. But it could theoretically also go to kindergarten at center school, kindergarten at Windermere, 1st grade, wherever that position is needed. That's why it's unassigned.
So we have approved these in the order that you've been put to us?
No, so the I think possible motion reads that it would just be for the transfer to the teacher salary account, just so that we could restore that 1.0 library media specialist. I will just quickly say, before you all be aware of this, the town meeting this year vote is going to pass the budget or not. So, we would encourage everybody to bring out yourselves, your spouses, anybody, your neighbors, friends, that want to support the budget, because that vote at the town hall, at the town meeting, which is the 2nd Tuesday in May, will be the vote on record for the total town budget.
Are you gonna get that information out to the parents?
Yeah, we're working on the best way to communicate that out to everybody.
Yeah, that's 7 o'clock on the 11th, right?
Correct.
At high
It'll
school.
be at the high school auditorium. There will be some limited seating capacity just based on COVID protocols, but I think there will also be an online opportunity as well. So, talk to your neighbors, talk to friends about coming out and certainly, voting one way or another. Obviously, as the administration can't say which way people should vote, but encourage people to come out and be part of that democratic process.
Ms. Sen, can I just make one comment about the Board of Finance meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to state for the record that the relationship between the Board of Education and the Board of Finance and the administration continues to be really strong. And to watch the Board of Finance work through their various cuts on the education side and the town side, people are just working together. And it's really a testament to a lot of good people thinking about what the needs of the school district are and the needs of the town are. So it was nice to really be at those meetings and see that happen.
Thanks. With the recommendation leaving the funds in the health insurance budget, which leads me to a question, Brian. Where are we at? What is the amount that we have currently in that?
So currently we have $223,000 in there that was appropriated from the unassigned fund balance at a town meeting in April. And so that deposit should have been made. We are projecting in our year-end budget, kind of this year, returning to the town $150,000 from the really use of the dental fund reserve that we built up. And we're going to ask them to move that into the medical reserve account. I think the other thing that we're going to be talking to both the town administration, but also Board of Finance members about is, you know, if we return any money above what we currently project right now, could we even put more aside into that medical reserve account, build it up, because that's a really, you know, we have to be really fiscally disciplined over the next few years as we kind of build that reserve. Certainly the faster we can do it, the better that's going to be for us in the medium term.
Absolutely.
In collaboration with the other, school districts, are we receiving some money because we're joining that group?
Yeah, so the way that we,
And we're going to go into that fund too.
yeah, so the way that we structured the deal in moving into ACES was there was going to be savings all around. In order to make it kind of comparable with the fully insured quote that we had from another provider, we were actually able to negotiate that they are sharing some of their savings with us to the tune of about $76,000. And so those will be kind of made in payments throughout the year. But that is something we were able to kind of get as we were going into the collaborative.
And that will go into this reserve fund?
It will go into the reserve fund, yeah.
Not all at once, though, throughout the year.
Throughout the year, and, you know, quite frankly, we can just use it to pay claims, and so that, you know, it's kind of 6 1/2 dozen. It'll go to pay our claims, and, you know, we'll have that in reserve at the end of the year. Or, you know, depending on where our claims come in, theoretically, we're going to have that reserve at the end of the year.
Okay. Jen? Through the chair, might I ask a question about the move change over to self-insurance this year?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wondered where we're on self-insurance right now. Where do we stand with, I was reading minutes that we said we were going to set up, meetings with the staff.
Yes.
And if it's possible, could you inform us of where we stand on that point?
Sure. So we've been working through, with Anthem, the stuff that we need to do to get the program set up. We have a meeting, next Monday, with all the union heads and representation, to make sure that, they have a sense of what's going on. I've seen some preliminary numbers, that our coverage is about 97.8%, you know, similar year to year. In terms of the providers, I think it was about 15 providers of 500 and something that weren't part of the Anthem network, and so we'll work on those individual cases with people as they come up. You know, with any carrier change, you're going to have, you know, one prefers a certain type of test strip, other preferred, you know, different types. So we'll work through that stuff with anybody who has individual questions. So the union meetings are next Monday. We'll hold those, and then in May, kind of as we typically do with open enrollment, we'll be holding our kind of employee meetings that will, you know, allow them to ask their questions. We're going to hold those. Typically, we do it, you know, one at 2:30 so that the middle school and high school staff can join us, and then one at 3:30 so that the elementary staff can join us and ask their question.
Those are the ones we're going to want to be a part of.
Yes, I know a couple board members asked to be a part of those as well, so we'll make sure that when those occur, that happens.
Right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to mention that I'm very happy that we're going to be putting the library specialist back into the budget, because we heard from so many different teachers that they really wanted that, and we wanted to hear from the teachers this year in our budget workshops and everything. And now, you know, we're be able to put that back and show that the board has listened to our staff.
was there an update?
Yeah, so, and Dr. Young was unable to get on, so Brian, if you could give a brief report? Thank you.
Sure, happy to. We had 3 agenda items. The first agenda item was the discussion of technology integration staffing. And we made a recommendation to go from a 0.6 to a 1.0 due to a resignation of staff member. We discussed elements of that. We also connected that to a raised bill out of the General Assembly 977, an act regarding virtual learning. So lots of connections to the importance of that 1.0, and much of the discussion this evening revolved around the need to have those positions in the district. So that was discussed. The second agenda item, we talked about curriculum and PD priorities of staff for the summer. So we had a robust conversation. An item of note that is a slight shift, throughout the past year is the need at the secondary level to talk about, staff talking about social justice, implicit bias in relation to SEL. So there's a lot of, discussion coming out of our PDAC teams, especially at the middle school and high school on those topics. We just talked about the process for that. And the last topic was the EDU Innovate, and just went through the process of how that works. The EDU Innovate is in the process of approving all the grants, and once those grants are approved by EDU Innovate, they go to the curriculum committee in May, and then they go to the full board for review. So that was just a brief recap of the agenda items.
Can I ask you a question about the technology integration? Where will that person be focused? Is that K-6?
Yes, at the elementary level. Yeah, I'll repeat the question was, what level would that technology integration shift from the 0.6 to the 1.0? The current allocation is at the 0.6 of the elementary. The 1.0 shift to that would still remain at the elementary level.
Yes, Scott, go ahead.
Just a point of order on the possible motions. The 0.6 to 1.0, that's in the action items, because that was something that went through the curriculum committee and was recommended, so we put that, in the posting. We did not do the posting for the 1.0 library media specialist position in the agenda. And that was something that could have, if a board member wanted to raise the motion on that agenda item. Certainly, a board member could raise it at any time, but if we get to the action items, we would have to do an add action item for that motion in regards to the budget.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to make a motion for that library media specialist?
I'll move that we approve the reinstatement of the 1.0 library media specialist position to the 2021-2022 school year budget as recommended by the superintendent of schools.
Second.
Seconded by Liz. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for that point of order. Next is, thank you, Brian. Next is operations. Karen?
Yep, we did have an operations meeting, and Angela Mosier joined our meeting, so thank you for joining our operations meeting. A couple of things we're gonna add to the action items that have come out of the meeting. One of them was, a lot of signs going on here, but I'll let Gary add the sign he's been wanting to, out at the,
That would be his wife wants the sign.
we're recommending to the board that there's a new sign that's gonna go out on Main Street that is a marker for the Board of Education office. Very nice, you're gonna see a picture of it, I think you'll all like it. It's a giant neon flashing number. It's actually really nice, and it will fit within the scheme of our community, I think, very nicely. That was one of the things, everyone was in support of that. Thank you, Brian Reedley, for working on that. Also, the center school PTO the center school, so they're going to have a series of signs outside and inside to kind of, I guess, add to the atmosphere. The PTO is put up the funds for it, and they came up with some motivating words and sayings that they want to put throughout the school and in the entrance where you do the drop-offs as well. So we're going to be the committee will be recommending the approval of the center school signs, which is paid for by the PTO. The other item that will be added to the action items is the approval of a Gaga pit at center school. I don't know if any of you are familiar with what a Gaga pit is, but Tim Weber, who is a senior at Ellington High School, he's doing this as part of a scout project. I don't know if the Boy Scouts is still the right terminology. Eagle Scout, sorry, thank you. I knew the name had changed. The Eagle Scout project that he's doing, it has to be done before a certain date, I guess under the rules, but he did a nice presentation to the committee about how he's going to, with the help of his group, will be building a Gaga pit, and he works very closely with the principal over there, and Principal Venamir is very excited about this. He had it at his former school, so we look forward to brushing up on our skills at the Gaga pit game. We'll be recommending that to the board as well. That is not going to cost us any money to do. However, there could be some maintenance costs in the future, but it seems pretty minimal overall. The other thing is we did get an update from Mr. Greenlee. I know that Marion, you had brought to my attention some things going on in the legislative level where they were talking about air quality. So he did kind of update us. The roofs on all the schools, none of them are leaking right now, and we do not think, given the inspection and what Mr. Remus reported at the schools, that we do not think there's an issue at this time regarding the air quality of the schools, that they're being well maintained. If there has been a leak, the tile will be changed out, and that there's no indicators to that this would be. And we're also going to wait to look for direction from the state as to if they're going to do funding for that or what their mandates are going to be before acting on it, given that we don't see any issues. We did talk about the gym floor up at Crystal Lake. That is continuing to be monitored and will be addressed in the fall. For some reason, they're going to look at that again in the fall. Trying to think of the fire doors, continuing with our fire door project. Brian's still here. You want to talk about the fire doors? I don't remember the details on which one still needs to be replaced.
Quick update on the fire doors. Basically, we did a little bit at Windermere and a little bit at the high school last year. And, we have in the capital program that is going to the town meeting, another reason to come out and support it, if you can, or however you want.
Did you really mean that, Brian? Vote however you want? Because I don't know if they felt that one.
One thing that will be in there is the fire door project to do the rest of them. They'll kind of close the door on that, and then we can go on to kind of the annual maintenance program.
One of the other things that's really exciting is that, if you haven't noticed, the town purchased a lot behind Center School. So we are going to have future talks about what that, right now the town has the property and some turned over to
the last lot where the house was repurchased, they're gonna raise the building within the summer.
Okay. All right, so that's all I have. Is there any questions about operations?
Karen, where do we stand on hiring the person to fill the open position in facilities?
Oh, Ryan did mention that in the meeting. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Sorry.
So we had narrowed it down as of yesterday to a candidate that's going forward to the superintendent. And so hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a little longer depending on his work obligations, that person would be on board.
My question is on the signage. Is there any town regulations that we need to oblige by as far as?
Yeah, it's Brian, did a great job. He already went through the zoning board.
Great.
So we're good with, he's covered all the bases before bringing it to operations, so thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, that concludes my report. I will be, doing a motion to add the additional action items number 5, 6, and 7.
Thank you. Finance, communications policy, there were no meetings this month.
Jennifer,
Yes.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but even though there was no communications meeting, I do have just a couple of quick things.
Absolutely, go ahead.
So today, another episode of Behind the Scenes with the BOE was distributed to everybody. And one of the key things that we're gonna be focusing on is, the TV studio that's here at the high school, and there's also one at the middle school. And, I am going to be working, with students as well as the teacher of that class to utilize that studio more and to get some students more involved as far as helping, whether it's directing or doing any of the camera work or anything like that. So I just want to mention that.
Excellent, it's a great space, so that's awesome. Okay, thank you. Administrative report, superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say for the record, I really appreciate the discussion on the distant learning models. Super hard conversation. So I appreciate everyone's perspective on that. So thank you for a really good discussion. And issues of time, just a really quick update on the legislation that we're trying to get passed for the teacher residency program. That did come out of the Education Committee. Because money is attached to it. Now the Appropriations Committee has been taking all of the Education Committee legislation that came out over the next couple of days. I think they're going to be meeting on, it should be by Friday, they have to get that done. They have to come out of it by the deadline. And so what happens here is, they have X amount of bills that have come out of committee. And they only go to the appropriations if they cost money. If they don't cost money, they go a different direction. And so they look at all of the bills and they sit there and they say, okay, what are we going to appropriate funds to? And so it's very difficult to know how much money will be appropriated to the teacher residency program and how that will go. And once everything comes out of appropriations, then it goes through another process to see if the bill is going to become law and be voted on. So I will keep you updated, but we're hopeful that there will be some money that may come to us in the future, and hopefully this will become law. And that's it for my program, my report. Thank you.
Director's report, monthly finance, Brian, just stand up here.
My phone's over here, I'm trying to get my steps in, don't worry. All right, so monthly financial report, we still have a pretty healthy balance in there, but it's went down over time. Just a couple of highlights from down below. So the non-certified substitutes is a pretty big negative line item right now. We think there's some pretty components in there that won't actually come to fruition. So we're working to cut those positions out. And so that should come down. It won't totally be eliminated. It will still be in a negative deficit. So that's based on hiring more substitutes at a higher rate this year that we needed. The other one that I want to quickly highlight is tuition. That will come down and probably be fully eliminated. The excess cost grant that comes in, we typically budget about 70% for that. And it typically comes in anywhere from This year, probably due to COVID, it's actually going to be closer to 80%. Which obviously represent about another $40,000-$50,000 that will come back to us in revenue and help our bottom line at the end of the year. So other than that, I'm certainly happy to entertain any other questions.
Brian, the non-certified substitutes, could any of that be reduced with COVID funding?
Yeah, possibly. I would have to look into that. We are going to reduce the supplies line item 600, which is in deficit of 187,000.
Yep.
We are going to reduce that line item by $100,000 with the ESSER 2 monies. We may be able to do something similar with the ESSER 3 monies for that line item, but not necessarily at this time.
That line item also includes certified substitutes.
Technically all substitutes are non-certified. Except for those that may have their certification, but not in a certified role. And so we're going to work on changing that terminology for the next go around, but it covers substitutes for teachers, it covers substitutes for aides, it covers substitutes for support staff.
Any questions? Thank you, Brian. Board liaison reports. Usually we'll start with you.
All right, starting on this side. Let's see. So at the last meeting, our Ellington High School was in the middle of United Week. Which, speaking of which, I'll just give another shout out to Alyssa and Nick. We recognized earlier in the meeting for their involvement in ULC, but they are fantastic people. So speaking more about the great things ULC was doing, we had a 45-minute guest speaker, Eric Jackson, who was just fantastic. Talked about destroying your box. That was his theme, of getting used to having uncomfortable conversations and going outside the box to connect with others. And I think that is such a great lesson for all of us, and that's certainly in line with the Seeds of Civility, too. United Week concluded with the Unified game, a really good tradition. The game was played. Students were able to watch it virtually, along with some interviews with players and teachers. So that was a great experience. I had mentioned a lot of interest in diversity and inclusion at the last meeting of all the different clubs happening. A few more that have started up since then. I'll give a few a shout out. The Women's Leadership Coalition was started. I'll recognize Ruby, Emily, Eve, Maya, and Maddie, who have been leading that. And then we also have a new Racial Unity Club, which has been started by Priya Chakraborty, Nikwan Sami, and Ali Wang. And lastly, a new EHS Action Alliance started by Rai Kumar. So all those clubs are still continuing to be made. There's tons of interest in diversity and inclusion at EHS, which is a great thing to see. April break was last week. I think it came at a good time for all of us to recharge and just take a little break from school. Juniors got a chance to get ready for the NGSS testing, the science exam, which was this morning. And aside from that, we're all looking forward to the end of the year activities that Mr. Guidry already talked about. I'm certainly looking forward to prom and senior class day and class night and graduation and the parade, definitely.
And I'd like to know how Ayushman relaxes and takes a break, because I don't know if that's possible, but like, what do you do on your break?
Let's see, sleep in until almost noon. That was
Good for
great.
you, all right.
Yeah. Visited a few colleges. Yep. Visited a few colleges, which was good to see. I'm still figuring that out. I've actually made my decision for that, so I am committing to Brown University.
Oh, congratulations, yeah.
So we were doing visits over April break.
See, Ayushman, when, at Providence College, when I went there, and we didn't have a spring break. We weren't allowed to have like a spring break on campus, but Brown was. So when Brown had their spring break, all the Providence College students would buy tickets and go over to Brown and hang out.
Yeah.
So.
Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's an awesome school. Congratulations. We were Brown wannabes. This is true. Yes, we weren't. We didn't have the grades to get into Brown. I certainly didn't.
All righty, on that note, Gary, you have
Yes.
Okay, we're going with that. Thank you, here.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. Liz, Board of Finance. Do you have anything for women?
Okay, so Brian, and between Brian and Ken, just about everything about the finance meetings have been said. They were in deliberation for 2 nights, and they will be presenting the budget to the town.
We keep stealing from your stuff. Okay, so that's it for, liaison reports, action items.
I'd like to, add the following action item. Move to add as action item number 5, approval of Gaga Fit at Center School.
Seconded by Liz, any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained,
I'd like to add action item, number 6, approval of the PTO signage project at Center School. I'd like to move to add that action item number 6. Second?
anybody else? Thank you.
Sorry.
Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Move to add action item number 7, approval of the replacement of the central office sign. Go ahead.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed or abstained, motion carries. Okay, acceptance of the personal retirement request of Deborah Delamere, literary specialist for Central School, effective June 30th, 2021.
Second.
No, somebody's got to read the motion.
Oh, I thought you were reading it. No, what sounded like that. Okay. Move that the Board of Education accept with regret and best wishes the retirement request of Deborah Milner. Am I saying that?
Milner.
Milner, literary specialist at Center School effective June 30th, 2021.
Second. Seconded by Miriam. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Acceptance of the personal retirement request of Robin Klein, literary specialist at Windermere School, effective, literacy specialist, sorry, effective June 30th, 2021. Make that move.
Move that the Board of Education accept with regret and best wishes the retirement request of Robin Klein, literacy specialist at Windermere School, effective June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Seconded by Miriam.
I was going to wait for you to say discussion, but I wanted to say something.
Any discussion?
I just wanted to state, sometimes Deb Hillmeyer and Robin Klein have had long and distinguished careers and have done an amazing job helping so many kids learn, especially how to read. And, we just, best wishes for them. They've done a great job for the Ellington Public Schools.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed or abstained, motion carries. Approval of the FTE increase of technology integrationist from 0.6 to 1.0.
Move that,
Go ahead.
move that the Board of Education approve the full-time, position increase of technology integration position from 0.6 to 1.0 for the 2021-22 school year.
Seconded by Angie. Any discussion?
Jen?
Yeah.
Could I ask, just a question as to, originally we were going to move, a technology person, integrationist down to the elementary school from the high school. Will that be in addition to this increase?
Yes, so the original budget for the reorg for K-8 was going to be plus 0.4 FTE. With the addition of the library media specialist, right, 1.0, you're at 1.4 plus K-8. With moving this from 0.6 to 1.0, we intend to keep that in the K-8 reorg. So you're really going to have 1.8 FTE additional in the K-8 reorg. So we're super excited to be able to use those resources to make an awesome program for kids.
And when will we get kind of an outline of what that program is going to look like?
May board meeting. We're working on it now.
Request for the disposal of the Board of Education maintenance van.
We have to vote on that.
Right, no. Oh, sorry, we didn't vote, sorry. I'm moving ahead, sorry. Okay, all in favor for the FTE increase in technology, signify by saying aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Sorry, request for the disposal of the Board of Education maintenance van.
Move that the Board of Education request permission from the Board of Selectmen to dispose of the Board of Education van in a manner deemed appropriate of the Board of Selectmen. I don't know.
Who seconded that? Sorry. Thank you, Miriam. Seconded by Miriam. Any discussion?
What is typically, like, is there sorry, Ryan, is there any financial gains from us that could
Yeah, I mean, this van is in pretty rough shape, so I think if we expect anything, it will be less than probably $1,000. And we'll work with the town to figure out the best way to account for that.
Thank you.
Aye.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Approval of the Gaga pit for Central School.
Yes, I move to approve the Gaga pit at Center School as recommended by the Operations Committee. Gary, second.
Liz got there first. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Approval of the PTO signage at Center School.
Move to approve the PTO signage project at Center School as recommended by the Operations Committee.
Second.
Seconded by Gary. Any discussion?
Aye.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
About time.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries.
This one's you, Gary.
Here it comes, Gary. Approval of the replacement of the central office sign.
To approve the placement of the central office sign with the project as recommended by the Operations Committee.
Second.
Seconded by Gary. Any discussion?
Could I ask how much that's going to cost?
About $2,500.
And we budgeted for that?
Ryan said that we have enough. And that,
Yes, we have some reserve balances in our maintenance projects that we're going to take it out.
Okay.
Any other questions?
People we will now find where the Board of Education office is.
Well, I drove by today. I don't see the sign because I come up from Penny Street, so I went the other
The
way
new one is not here.
to look for the sign.
Yeah.
And after I said, I don't even remember that I don't know what this sign looks like. So I did go the other way to look for the sign because I came to this meeting.
Gary, are you gonna get that up this weekend?
There'll also be I forgot to say this, but there'll also be a sign on the outside of the building, right? You're putting that other sign, you're like a round sign that you're doing, where's that one?
That's when you want to build it, right?
On the building, right on the outside?
Yes, in the main kind of entryway there to
Yeah.
the central office building on the left, there's a sign. You probably walk past it 100 times, it doesn't stand out. And so it'll again be a big round sign with our logo on it going up there as well.
So this is part of that motion, that those signs are all included in this one motion.
Okay, we've seconded, we've discussed. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.